140 years ago, the head of IT in Silo 18 ended a rebellion by putting something in the water supply. Residents thought they were drinking their ration. They were actually forgetting a little more every day until the anger just wasn't there anymore. It worked so well, it bought this silo 140 years of quiet. Right now, in the season that's currently airing, somebody is doing it again. Same method, same water supply, new label on the container. And that repeat is basically the whole argument I want to make today. Because if you're still ranking silos departments by who keeps the lights on, you are grading the wrong test. Quick spoiler flag before we go further. This covers Silo Season 3 through the episode that dropped this week, plus a good amount of the books. If you're behind, pause here and come back. I've gone through the show scene by scene and read the source novels underneath it, and I think the usual fan debate has been aiming at the wrong department from the start. So instead of repeating that debate, let's actually run the evidence. Here's the shape of the argument as most people run it. Mechanical says the generator is the whole silo. Kill it, and the elevators die. The air stops moving. The pumps stop pushing water and waste through a mile of concrete. Supply says none of that matters if nobody's fed. Medical points at the birth lottery. Judicial points out that 10,000 people would turn on each other inside a year without somebody enforcing the rules. Every one of those arguments is true. That's exactly the problem with the debate. True isn't the same as complete. So let's move fast through the departments that get the most airtime, because they've earned it, before getting to the one that doesn't. Mechanical's case is the loudest for a reason. The generator sits deep below everything else, and it powers literally every other system in the structure. Cut it, and you're not looking at inconvenience. You're looking at a body count within days. The show has run Mechanical through failing heat tape and a dying pump more than once. Crises that could genuinely have killed people if nobody fixed them fast enough. Every single time, somebody fixed them. Supply's case is quieter and honestly underrated. Carla's team doesn't manufacture anything. They move what already exists to wherever it's needed, which sounds unglamorous until you remember that 10,000 people are trusting that chain to never fail. Not once, not for a single department. Farming, tucked into the hydroponic and livestock levels in the silo's middle, grows the food. Supply hands out in the first place, and one genuinely bad harvest would expose fast how much everyone downstream takes that work for granted. Medical gets folded into logistics too easily. This is the department running the birth lottery, the mechanism deciding who's even allowed to have children inside a population that's capped by design. That's not triage. That's control over whether this society continues to exist at all, run by people most residents never think about until something's already gone wrong. And judicial enforces the pact, the rulebook keeping 10,000 people cooperating instead of fighting over rations. Judicial's the department that shows up after something's already broken, tearing through Mechanical hunting a missing hard drive, arresting people over hidden history. Genuinely important. But it's reactive by design. It protects a structure it never built and doesn't actually control. Before making the case for IT, Mechanical deserves its strongest possible version of the argument, because it's a real one. A power failure kills people this week, not over some slow, abstract, multi-generational timeline. It's immediate, physical, and undeniable, and nobody watching a pump fail on screen thinks, well, at least the archives are intact. That's a completely fair objection. It's also exactly the trap this silo's own history keeps punishing people for falling into. Which brings us to IT, and to why this debate usually stalls out here without going deep enough. IT's edge was never about running machinery. It's about controlling what residents get told about their own history. And the show has spent 3 seasons and about 140 in-world years proving that's a scarier weapon than any generator could be. 140 years before the current timeline, that job belonged to a man named Salvador Quinn. Quinn crushed what the silo now calls the Great Rebellion, and he didn't do it with more guards. He restricted server access, pulled books out of circulation, and slipped something into the water supply that gradually wore down what residents remembered about why they'd been angry in the first place. The silo calls the day it ended Freedom Day. Nobody's wrong that it ended. They're just wrong about who got to define free. Quinn is also the one who originally found the algorithm, a hidden system sealed behind a tunnel at the very bottom of the silo that almost nobody located again for a century. When Lucas Kyle finally reached that same door in Season 2, the voice on the other side told him only 3 people had ever stood where he was standing before. Quinn, a judge named Mary Meadows, who later decoded one of Quinn's coded letters and was quietly poisoned once she got too close to what it said, and Juliet's old partner, George Wilkins, who didn't survive asking questions either. Getting near that door has a mortality rate. That fact alone says more about the real power structure here than any generator does. And this isn't a twist invented for streaming television. It goes back further than the show. Hugh Howey's second novel, Shift, opens decades before anyone's living underground at all, following a congressman named Donald Keene who gets pulled into a government project called CAD-FAC, short for Containment and Disposal Facility. The entire system, the silos, the pact, the memory control, wasn't a desperate improvisation after some accident. It was designed on purpose, by people who understood exactly how dangerous accurate information would be to a population trying to survive centuries underground. Season 3 is currently dramatizing that exact backstory, built around a congressman named Daniel Keene and a reporter named Helen Drew, working through the political maneuvering that led to this entire world existing in the first place. If a show about underground bunkers suddenly starts looking like a political thriller, that's not a tonal accident. That's the show telling you the real subject was never the bunkers. Zoom out, and the pattern isn't unique to this one silo either. There are 51 of these things total, all built from the same blueprint, all technically answering to a central control point the show calls Silo 1. Silo 17, the ruined structure Juliet stumbles into during Season 2, appears to have been slated for a full remote shutdown from that central authority, and only survived as long as it did because of interference inside IT's own systems years earlier. IT didn't save Silo 17. It just decided how the ending arrived, and everyone who eventually walked out that airlock still died anyway. From the toxic air they'd been told for generations wasn't survivable. 50 of these structures are sitting out there right now under the same arrangement, each one identical in layout. Each one theoretically one bad signal away from getting the same treatment Silo 17 got. Not one of those 51 outcomes runs through a generator. Every single one of them runs through whoever's sitting in the office that talks to Silo 1. That's not a Silo 18 problem. That's the design specification running underneath the entire system. And Mechanical was never anywhere near the room where that specification got written. So here's what makes this argument land differently in 2026 than it would have a year ago. Season 3 didn't just keep it in charge of information, it handed the office to Camille Sims, and Season 2's finale already told us something important about how that happened. When Robert Sims, her own husband, stood in that vault after years of loyalty to the department and all but asked for the job himself, the voice running the vault looked past him and picked her instead. Programs don't reward loyalty. They calculate outcomes. Whatever it saw in Camille, it wasn't gratitude. That voice has a name now, the algorithm. In Season 3, it stops sitting quietly in the background and starts actively running Camille's decisions. It hands her options, nudges her toward one of them, and lets her walk away believing the choice was hers the whole time. And the option currently on the table is worse, in a specific way, than the classic safeguard everyone already knew about. The remotely triggered agent built to end a silo in minutes if it ever needs shutting down completely. What the algorithm is floating instead is slower and honestly colder. There's a compound moving through Silo 18 labeled as a vitamin supplement. It isn't one. It's the delivery method for a gradual, full memory reset dosed through the water supply, aimed at the entire population, with the trigger being whether Juliet recovers enough of what she saw outside these walls. Killing a population is one kind of atrocity. Quietly rewriting what's left of it is a different, colder one. And notice the method. Water supply, disguised as nutrition, administered without consent. That's not a new idea from this season's writers. That's Salvador Quinn's exact playbook from 140 years ago, just running under new management, with a machine holding the dosage schedule instead of a man. Even Judicial is starting to flinch under this arrangement. Robert Sims told his wife he'd executed Bernard Holland on the algorithm's orders. He hadn't. He'd kept Bernard alive instead, quietly, and the show is still working out why a man that loyal to the system just stopped trusting the thing running it. When the department built to enforce consequences on everyone else starts routing around its own chain of command, that tells you the chain of command has stopped being trustworthy, even to the people inside it. Put that next to the generator scenario one more time. If Mechanical's machine failed completely tomorrow, that's a horrifying, deadly, but comprehensible crisis. People would understand exactly what happened and organize around fixing it. If the algorithm's plan goes through instead, there's no single event for 10,000 people to organize around. Because the thing that just happened to them is that they stopped being who they were an hour earlier. One of those failures breaks equipment. The other one breaks a population's grip on its own memory. Step back far enough and the show has built its entire argument around a single word choice, and it stops being subtle once you notice it. The writers didn't name that system the committee or the council. They named it the algorithm. That's a word most of us already live next to. It picks what shows up in a feed, what gets recommended, sometimes what gets buried, and plenty of people interacting with one every day couldn't fully explain how it reached its conclusion, even if they tried. Silo just took that relationship and put an entire population's memory on the other end of it. That's not me stretching a sci-fi show to make a point. It's the plainest possible reading of what's actually on screen. A system nobody voted for, making irreversible calls about what 10,000 people get to know, staffed by whoever the system itself selects to carry out its instructions. Camille didn't campaign for that job. The algorithm picked her, specifically because it correctly calculated she could be pushed further than most people would allow themselves to go. So when the fandom argument circles back to which department actually keeps this silo alive, the honest answer stopped being about departments a while ago. It's about whoever, or whatever, controls the story everyone else is required to believe. Mechanical keeps 10,000 people breathing. Whatever's really behind that voice in the vault decides whether those 10,000 people get to keep being who they were. There are 3 episodes left as of this posting, titled Grey Goo, Farewell, and the finale, Troy. And each one of them is basically an opportunity for the show to either confirm or completely dismantle everything I just laid out. Does Robert's quiet defiance of his own wife turn into something louder? Does Juliet recover enough of what she saw outside to actually become the trigger the algorithm has apparently been calculating around this whole time? And does any part of what's buried in that vault ever reach the 10,000 people whose lives depend on it? Or does this silo just get a quieter, more efficient version of what Salvador Quinn already pulled off 140 years ago? I don't think the show is going to hand us a clean answer, and honestly, if it did, that would undercut the entire point it spent 3 seasons building. Season 3 has been dropping weekly since the start of July, 1 episode every Friday, with that finale landing September 4th. Apple's already confirmed a 4th and final season to close out the trilogy, which means whatever the algorithm decides in the next few weeks isn't the end of this argument. It's the setup for the last one. If you think I got the ranking backwards, the comment section is open and I actually read through it. Tell me which department you'd trust with the vault key and why. And if breakdowns like this are your kind of thing, there's more silo analysis coming from this channel before that finale hits. So subscribing now means you're not scrambling to catch up later. See you in the next one.